Hey guys, tonight we crawl into the claustrophobic, ear-splitting world of a WW2 tank crewman, where every moment's a gamble with death. Picture this. You're squeezed into a rattling steel box, the air thick with diesel fumes and sweat, the roar of the engine drowning out your thoughts. Outside, shells scream and mud churns, and you're praying your armor holds. Spoiler alert. You probably won't survive this without nerves of steel and a lot of luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're bunkering down tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 1943. And you're a tank crewman, maybe in a Soviet T-34, a British Sherman, or a German Panzer IV, rolling across the scarred fields of Europe or the Eastern Front. The war's a meat grinder, and you're in the thick of it, part of a five-man crew crammed into a metal beast that's both your weapon and your cage. Your world's a haze of smoke, mud, and fear, where survival hinges on split-second decisions and the guy next to you. The tank smells of oil, gunpowder, and unwashed socks, and every jolt shakes your bones like a bad carnival ride. Mainstream fact. Historical records show that WW2 tanks, like the T-34, were mass-produced with sloped armor to deflect shells, with over 80 000 built by the Soviets to counter German advances. You're in one now, maybe on the Eastern Front, where battles like Kursk turned fields into graveyards. Your tank's a marvel of engineering, but it's also a death trap, cramped, noisy, and prone to catching fire. A quirky tidbit? Some crews painted nicknames on their tanks, like Fury or Betsy, to boost morale or just to feel human in this steel coffin. Historians still argue whether tank warfare's success came from superior tech or sheer numbers overwhelming the enemy. You're the loader, hunched in the turret, your job to shove 76mm shells into the breach faster than the enemy can aim. Your crew's a tight unit. Commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, and you, all packed into a space smaller than a modern SUV. The commander's barking orders, his voice muffled by the engine's roar. You're sweating despite the cold, your wool uniform scratching like sandpaper. The tank's interior is a maze of levers, gauges, and sharp edges that bruise your shins. You've already banged your head twice today. Great start. Outside, the world's chaos. You're rolling through a muddy field, tracks grinding, the ground pockmarked with craters. You glimpse the battlefield through a narrow vision slit smoke, flashes, and the distant shapes of enemy tanks. Your heart's pounding, but you focus on the next shell, its weight familiar in your hands. You're not a hero, just a guy trying to keep up. You chuckle, imagining explaining this to someone with a desk job. Yeah, I load explosives while being shot at. 5 stars. Your crew's your lifeline. The gunner, a wiry guy named Alex, is steady but snaps when you're too slow. The driver, Ivan, curses the mud but keeps the tank moving. You've been together for months, sharing smokes and bad jokes to dull the fear. Last week, you lost a tank nearby, gone in a fireball. You don't talk about it, but it's there, like a shadow. You're headed for a village, orders crackling through the radio to support infantry. The plan's vague, and you're not sure what's waiting. For now, you load another shell, brace for the next jolt, and hope you make it through the day. You're crammed inside the tank, the air thick with the stench of diesel and sweat, as you grip the next shell, ready to feed the beast that is your cannon. The engine's roar is a living thing, shaking your bones and rattling your teeth as the tank lurches over a muddy ridge. You're the loader, wedged in the turret, your shoulders brushing against the gunners as you try not to bash your head on the low ceiling again. The commander's shouting something, but the engine's growl drowns him out. A relentless beast that both powers your survival and threatens to deafen you. You smirk, thinking how future folks would complain about a loud car stereo. Try living inside a 30-ton monster that screams louder than a rock concert, pal. Mainstream fact. WW2 tanks, like the T-34, as documented in Soviet military records, were powered by diesel V12 engines, producing over 500 horsepower to haul their 26-ton frames through mud and snow. Your tank's engine is a beast, but it's finicky. Overheat it, and you're stuck. Starve it of fuel, and you're a sitting duck. A quirky tidbit? Some crews swore their tanks had personalities, naming them after stubborn mules or sweethearts back home, claiming they'd coax better performance with a pat and a prayer. Historians still argue whether engine reliability or crew skill was the bigger factor in tank survival rates. You shove the shell into the breach, slamming it shut with a clang that echoes in the cramped turret. The engine's vibration hums through the floor, making your boots buzz. You're rolling through a churned-up field, probably somewhere on the Eastern Front, the ground a mess of mud and frost. The driver, Ivan, is wrestling the levers, cursing as the tracks slip. You glance at him through the hatch, his face slick with sweat despite the chill. "Keep us steady, or we're digging out again," you yell, half joking. He flips you a rude gesture, and you grin crew love, right? Starting the tank was its own ordeal this morning. You were out there at dawn, cranking the starter while Ivan checked the fuel lines, both of you freezing in your thin wool coats. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, spewing black smoke like an angry dragon. You cheered, mostly because you didn't have to push the damn thing. You chuckle, imagining a modern mechanic's face. "Needs an oil change? Try not getting shot first. The engine's running smooth now." But you know it's a temperamental beast, one bad bump, and you're wrenching it apart in a ditch. The commander's barking coordinates, his voice hoarse over the engine's din. You're headed for a village, maybe to flank enemy positions, but the radio's fuzzy, and details are scarce. You load another shell, a high-explosive round, your hands moving on muscle memory. The turret's a sauna of heat from the engine and gun, but your back's cold from the steel walls. You've got a rhythm load, brace, wait, but every jolt makes you flinch, expecting a shell to rip through. You've seen what happens when one does. Remember that fireball last week? No time to dwell, though. The gunner, Alex, is squinting through his sight, muttering about visibility. You pass him a rag to wipe the lens, joking, "Clean that or you're shooting at ghosts." He snorts, but takes it. The engine's roar is your heartbeat, keeping you moving, keeping you alive. You're burning fuel fast, and the gauge is worryingly low. You've got a few cans strapped outside, but refueling under fire is a nightmare. You think of the supply trucks, always late, and sigh. Soviet logistics, the real enemy. Outside, the world's a blur of smoke and snow through your vision slit. The engine's power is your only edge, but it's a leash 2 breakdown, and you're dead. You pat the turret, half superstitious, like it's a horse that needs calming. The crew's tense but focused, each man a cog in this rattling machine. You're not sure what's waiting in that village, but the engine's roar is your war cry, and you're ready. Or at least, you hope you are. You're squeezed tight in the tank's turret, the engine's rumble. Remember that roaring beast? Vibrating through your boots as you brace against the steel walls. The air's thick with the tang of gunpowder and sweat, and you're shoulder to shoulder with your crew, Alex the gunner, Ivan the driver, the commander barking orders, and Yuri on the radio. You're the loader, but you're more than that. You're a cog in a human machine, bound by trust and the shared fear of not making it through the day. The tank's your home, your weapon, your coffin if things go wrong. You smirk, thinking how future folks would freak out in this sardine can. Try bonding with 4 guys when you're all one bad shot from oblivion, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as documented in military memoirs from the Eastern Front, typically numbered 5 men who trained to work as a single unit. Each role, commander, gunner, loader, driver, radio operator, critical to survival. Your T-34's, a Soviet workhorse built for speed and toughness, but it's only as good as the men inside. A quirky tidbit? Some crews carved their initials into the turret's interior, like schoolboys marking a desk, claiming their steel beast as home. Historians still argue whether crew cohesion or raw firepower mattered more in turning battles like Stalingrad. You're loading another shell, your hands slick but steady, the weight familiar as you ram it into the breach, the commander's shouting coordinates, his voice cutting through the engine's growl. Alex is glued to his sight, tracking something in the smoke beyond your vision slit. You're rolling toward a village, maybe German-held, and the tension's thick as the mud outside. You've been together months, long enough to know each other's quirks, Ivan's bad jokes, Yuri's chain smoking, Alex's habit of humming when he's nervous. You tease him now, whispering, "Sing louder, maybe they'll surrender." He elbows you, but you both grin. Trust is everything. Last week, Ivan pulled you out of a stalled tank under fire, risking his neck. Remember that fireball? You repaid him by sharing your last cigarette. It's not friendship, not exactly, it's survival. You've learned to read each other's moves. The commander's sharp nod means load fast. Yuri's twitch means bad news on the radio. You're a unit, but tempers flare. Yesterday, Alex snapped when you fumbled a shell, yelling you'd get them all killed. You let it slide, cramped quarters and death threats do that to a guy. You chuckle, imagining a modern team-building retreat. Trust falls? Try catching a 76mm shell. The tank jolts, and you brace, your knee banging the turret's edge. Ivan's cursing the terrain, some mix of frozen ruts and mud. You glance at Yuri, ear pressed to the radio, his face pale. He mutters about enemy positions, but static garbles the details. You load a high-explosive round, just in case. The crew's rhythm is your lifeline, one misstep, and you're done. You've seen it happen. A crew down the line hesitated, and their tank brewed up. You don't dwell, but it's there, a ghost in the steel. You share everything, rations, smokes, even the blanket when it's freezing. Last night, you all huddled under it, passing a flask of watered-down vodka. Yuri told a story about his girl back home, and you all laughed, pretending you'd see home again. It's these moments that keep you sane. Like the initials scratched inside the turret, proof you're more than cogs. You joke, if we go, at least our names stay. Ivan snorts, saying the tank's more likely to outlive you. He's not wrong. Outside, the village looms closer, smoke rising from shattered roofs. You're not sure what's waiting: Panzer IVs, anti-tank guns, or just scared infantry. The commander's calm, but his eyes are sharp, scanning through his periscope. You load another shell, your hands moving on instinct. The crew's your family, for better or worse, and you're in this together. The tank shakes, the engine roars, and you brace for what's next, hoping your bond holds stronger than the steel around you. You're hunched in the turret, the tank's steel walls closing in as you slam another shell into the breach, the clang barely audible over the engine's roar. Remember that beast. Sweat beads on your forehead, mixing with the grime of gunpowder and oil, as you squint through the vision slit at a world of smoke and chaos. The commander's shouting, "Target, 2 o'clock, 500 meters," and you feel the turret swing. Alex's hands steady on the gun controls. You're aiming under pressure. The enemy out there somewhere in the haze, and one wrong move could turn your T-34 into a fireball. You smirk, thinking how future folks would panic at a missed deadline. Try lining up a shot while shells scream past, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank gunners, as detailed in Soviet and Allied training manuals, used basic optical sights, like the T-34's TH-15, to aim with precision despite limited visibility and constant motion. Your job as loader is to keep Alex fed with shells, but his job hitting a moving target through dust and smoke is the real trick. A quirky tidbit? Some gunners marked their kills with chalk on the barrel, like a cowboy notching his gun, though nobody admitted to showing off. Historians still argue whether crew accuracy or sheer volume of fire decided tank battles like Kursk. You ram another shell home, high explosive this time, your hands moving on instinct despite the tank's jolts. Alex is glued to his sight, muttering about the target, a German Panzer, maybe, its silhouette flickering in the distance. The commander's voice is sharp, calling ranges, and you feel the turret jerk as Alex adjusts. You're rolling through a shattered village, the ground littered with rubble and snow. Your vision slit shows flashes, muzzle blasts, or explosions. You can't tell. You joke to yourself. Great view, 5-star apocalypse. It's gallows humor, but it keeps you steady. The tank lurches, Ivan cursing as he fights the mud below. You brace, your shoulder banging the turret's edge, another bruise for the collection. Alex fires, the cannon's boom deafening, the recoil shaking your teeth. You're already grabbing the next shell, your arms aching but fast. Hit! The commander yells, but there's no time to celebrate another target's out there. You load an armor-piercing round, its weight heavier in your hands. You've done this drill 100 times, but under fire, it's a new beast. You think of training, those cold mornings practicing, remember the crew's bond, and wish it felt this easy then. Smoke's thick now, clogging your lungs, and the tank's interior is a sauna of heat and fear. You glimpse the enemy through the slit, a Panzer IV, its turret turning your way. Your heart skips, but you keep moving, shoving the shell in. Alex is calm, too calm, his hands steady as he tracks. You whisper, "Don't miss, or we're toast." He doesn't reply, but you know he heard. The cannon fires again, and you're loading before the smoke clears. No word on a hit, but you're still alive, so that's something. The radio's crackling, Yuri relaying orders you can't hear over the chaos. The commander's shouting adjustments, and you're just trying to keep up. You've seen what happens when a shell hits tanks brew up. Crews don't get out. Remember that fireball? You push the thought away, focusing on the next round. The turret's a maze of sharp edges, and your knuckles are bleeding from a bad scrape. You chuckle, imagining a modern first aid kit. Band? Aid for bravery, anyone? No medics here, just grit. Your crew's in sync, each man a piece of the puzzle. Ivan keeps the tank moving, dodging craters. Yuri's on the radio, cursing static. The commander's eyes never leave his periscope. You're the loader, the unsung muscle, but you know your speed keeps them alive. The village is a blur of burning houses and gunfire, and you're not sure if you're winning or just surviving. Another shell, another boom, and you're still rolling. The pressure's crushing, but you're locked in, the crew's rhythm, your only anchor in this screaming, smoky hell. You're hunched over in the tank's cramped belly, the engine's low rumble. Remember that roaring beast? Vibrating through the steel as you clutch the radio's headset, its static crackling like a storm in your ears. The air's thick with the usual mix of diesel and sweat, and you're straining to hear orders through the hiss and pops. Outside, the world's a blur of smoke and snow. The village you fought through, remember those Panzer silhouettes? Now a distant smudge. The radio's your lifeline, connecting you to command, to other tanks, to survival itself. You smirk, thinking how future folks would rage quit over a bad Wi-Fi signal. Try getting orders when static's louder than the war, comrade. Mainstream fact, WW2 tank radios, like the Soviet 9R in T-34 second, were critical for coordinating movements, as documented in military logs, but were often plagued by interference and short range, especially in rough terrain. Your radio's a clunky box of wires, barely reliable, but it's your only link to the bigger picture. A quirky tidbit? Some crews taped photos of sweethearts or saints to their radios, hoping for luck or clearer signals talk about divine tech support. Historians still argue whether radio failures or poor tactics caused more losses in tank battles like Prokhorovka. You adjust the headset, its leather straps chafing your ears, and twist the dial, trying to cut through the static. Yuri, the radio operator, is beside you, cursing in whispers as he fiddles with the antenna cable. The commander's leaning in, shouting, "Anything yet?" You shake your head, catching fragments of a voice orders to hold position maybe, or advance. It's like piecing together a puzzle in a thunderstorm. You joke to Yuri, Maybe we're getting poetry instead of orders. He snorts, but his hands keep working, desperate for a clear signal. The tank's rolling slow, Ivan easing through a frozen field to avoid detection. You're somewhere on the eastern front, the cold seeping through the hull despite the engine's heat. The radio crackles again, and you catch a word flank before it cuts out. You relay it to the commander, who curses, his eyes glued to his periscope. You're loading shells too. Remember that breech slam? Doubling up since Yuri's swamped. The turret's a sweatbox, but your fingers are numb, and every jolt makes you fumble the headset. You think of last week's maintenance hell. Remember that muddy track? Wishing you'd checked the radio then. A sudden burst of clarity commands voice, sharp, ordering you to a ridge to support infantry. You shout it to the commander, who nods, barking at Ivan to turn. The tank lurches, and you brace, the radio set nearly toppling. You've got no time to fix it now. Alex is already tracking a target through his sight. You load an armor-piercing round, your hands moving on instinct. The radio's static flares again, drowning out the next message. You mutter, "Great, we're fighting blind and deaf." Yuri shoots you a look, but you both know it's true. The crew's tense, each man locked in his role. Ivan's fighting the terrain, Alex is aiming, the commander's scanning for threats. You're the loader, but the radio's your shadow job, and you're failing at it. You think of the crew's bond. Remember that shared vodka? How it's all that keeps you from cracking. A faint voice breaks through enemy tanks. 800 meters. You relay it, heart pounding. The radio's your lifeline, but it's also a tease, promising help that might not come. You chuckle, imagining a modern call center. Have you tried turning it off and on while being shelled? Outside, the ridge looms, and you're rolling toward it, the radio spitting half-heard warnings. You load another shell, ready for whatever's waiting. Yuri's still tweaking the dial, his face grim but focused. The statics are constant, like the war itself, but you've got no choice. Listen, load, survive. The tank shakes, the engine roars, and you're praying the next message comes through clear. For now, you're a voice in the noise, holding on to the crew and the crackling hope of making it through. You're slumped in the tank's turret, the engine's low growl. Remember that roaring beast? A dull hum as you fumble with a tin of rations, your fingers stiff from the cold. The air's thick with the stench of oil and unwashed uniforms, and the crew's crammed around you, each man eyeing the meager food like it's a feast. It's a rare pause. Somewhere in a shattered forest on the eastern front, the village battle. Remember those panzer silhouettes? A fading echo. You're trying to eat and catch a nap, but the war's a relentless nag, and sleep's as scarce as a hot meal. You smirk, thinking how future folks would complain about a missed coffee break. Try snatching rest between shellfire and breakdowns, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet and Allied memoirs, survived on canned rations like tushonka, stewed pork, and dry bread, often eating cold meals in cramped tanks during brief lulls, with sleep limited to stolen moments. Your rations are a dented tin of fatty meat and a crumbling biscuit, barely enough to quiet your stomach. A quirky tidbit? Some crews mixed their tea with sugar syrup from ration cans, calling it tank champagne to feel fancy in the filth. Historians still argue whether malnutrition or combat stress took a bigger toll on crew endurance. You pry open the tin with your knife, the metal scraping like a bad omen. The tushonka's greasy, cold, and tastes like salt and regret, but you shovel it in, passing the tin to Alex. He grumbles, "Better than nothing," and you nod, knowing nothing is a real risk. You're parked in a copse of trees, the tank's hull hidden under branches for cover. Ivan sprawled in the driver's seat, nibbling a biscuit, while Yuri's chain-smoking, the radio silent for once. Remember that crackling static. The commander's outside, scanning the dusk with binoculars, always on edge. Sleep's the real prize. You've been up for 2 days, eyes burning, and the tank's steel floor is your bed. You wedge yourself against the turret wall, a thin blanket shared with Alex. Remember that crew bond. It's not cozy, sharp edges dig into your back, and the cold seeps through the hull, but you'll take it. You joke, 5-star hotel, book early. Ivan snorts, tossing you a rag to cushion your head. You've learned to sleep in snatches. 5 minutes here, 10 there. Always ready to jolt awake if the radio barks or a shell lands too close. The food's gone, and you're sipping water from a canteen, its metallic taste familiar. You think of home, where your mother made borscht that didn't come from a tin. The memory stings, but you push it down. Yuri's telling a story about a girl in Moscow, his voice low to save energy. You all listen, half smiling, pretending you'll see home again. It's these moments, stale biscuits. Bad stories that keep you human. You chuckle, imagining a modern foodie reviewing your rations. Tushonka's bold, but lacks ambiance. 1 star. Outside, the forest is quiet, but you know better than to trust it. The commander climbs back in, muttering about German patrols. You're supposed to move at dawn, but for now, you've got this pocket of calm. You close your eyes, the tanks hum, lulling you, but sleep's a tease. Every creak or rustle snaps you alert. You've seen crews nod off and not wake up. Remember that fireball? The blanket's thin, but Alex's warmth beside you helps. You share it like brothers, not because you're soft, but because it's survival. The tank's your world. Its steel walls, both prison and shield. You're filthy, hungry, and half dead on your feet, but you're alive. The crew's your anchor. Ivan's snoring now. Yuri's still smoking, and the commander's sketching a map on a scrap of paper. You tuck the empty tin away, saving it for who knows what. Sleep pulls at you, but you fight it, knowing the war won't wait. For now, you rest when you can, eat what you've got, and hold tight to the crew that's keeping you sane. You're crouched in the turret, the tank's steel walls shuddering as a shell screams past, close enough to make your ears ring. The air's thick with acrid smoke and the tang of fear. The engines growl. Remember that roaring beast? A steady pulse beneath the chaos. You're loading shells fast, your hands slick with sweat, as the commander shouts targets through the haze. Outside, the battlefield's a nightmare of fire and mud. The village you rolled through, remember those panzer silhouettes? Now a burning graveyard. You're facing enemy fire, every moment a gamble with death. You smirk, thinking how future folks would lose it over a car crash. Try dodging anti-tank rounds in a 26-ton coffin, pal. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank battles, as documented in Eastern Front reports, saw crews face intense shell fire, with T-34 second surviving hits due to sloped armor, but often succumbing to German 88mm guns. Your tank's a tough beast, but a direct hit could brew you up in seconds, and you know it. A quirky tidbit. Some crews hung extra track links on their hulls, hoping the added steel would stop a shell desperate, but better than nothing. Historians still argue whether crew survival rates owed more to armor design or sheer luck in battles like Kursk. You slam another shell into the breach, the clang lost in the cannon's boom as Alex fires. The recoil jolts you, and you're already grabbing the next round, your arms burning. The commander's yelling, "Panzer! 3 o'clock, 600 meters!" And Alex swings the turret, his face grim through the gun sight. You squint through your vision slit smoke. Flashes, and the faint outline of a German tank. Your heart's hammering, but you keep moving. You joke to yourself. Great day for target practice, huh? It's a lie to stay sane. A shell hits nearby, the explosion rocking the tank, dirt clattering on the hull. You flinch, expecting the worst, but the armor holds. Ivan's cursing, wrestling the tank through a cratered field, while Yuri's on the radio shouting for support. Remember that crackling static? You load an armor-piercing round, its weight a familiar ache, the enemies firing back, their shells whistling like angry ghosts. You've seen what happens when one connects, tanks burn. Crews don't get out. Remember that fireball? You push the thought away, focusing on the breach. The turret's a sweatbox, the air choking with gunpowder fumes. Another shell grazes the hull, a screech of metal on metal, and you brace, your knees banging the steel. The commander's voice is steady, calling ranges, but you hear the strain. You whisper to Alex, "Don't miss, or we're barbecue." He doesn't reply, but his shot's true. A distant flash suggests a hit. No time to cheer. Another target's out there. You load again, your hands shaking but fast. You chuckle, imagining a modern gamer whining about lag. Try aiming with a panzer shooting back. The radio's screaming now. Yuri relaying panicked orders, hold the line. Infantry's pinned. You're in the thick of it. Shells bursting around you. The tank lurching as Ivan dodges a crater. Your crew's in sync, a machine of flesh and steel, but fears a constant passenger. You think of last night's rations? Remember that tushonka? How you laughed over bad tea? It feels like a lifetime ago. Another shell, another boom, and you're still alive. But the battlefield's a blur of death. You load, brace, and pray. The next hit isn't yours. The tank's armor is your only shield, but it's not enough to feel safe. You're dodging fire, moving fast, but every second's a roll of the dice. The crew's your strength, Alex's aim. Ivan's driving. Yuri's radio, the commander's calm. You're the loader, the heartbeat keeping the gun alive. The battle rages, smoke choking the sky, and you're not sure if you're winning or just surviving. For now, you load another shell, the turret shakes, and you hold tight to the hope that you'll see dusk. You're shivering in the tank's turret, the steel walls ice cold despite the engine's fading warmth. Remember that roaring beast? It's winter on the Eastern Front, maybe 1943, and the frost is as deadly as the enemy shells you dodged in that village battle. Remember those panzer silhouettes? The air's sharp with diesel and frostbite's threat, and you're bundled in a threadbare greatcoat, your breath fogging as you load a shell. The crew's huddled close, their faces pale and chapped, trying to keep warm in this frozen metal box. You smirk, thinking how future folks would cry over a broken heater. Try surviving a Russian winter in a T-34, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet military records, faced brutal winters on the Eastern Front, with temperatures dropping to 40 degrees Celsius, often causing frostbite and engine failures in tanks like the T-34. Your tank steel traps the cold, turning every surface into a freezer, and you're fighting to keep both the machine and yourself from freezing solid. A quirky tidbit? Some crews stuffed straw into their boots or wrapped their hands in rags, hoping to fend off frostbite. Think of it as a DIY winter survival kit. Historians still argue whether winter conditions or enemy firepower caused more tank crew losses during campaigns like Stalingrad. You slam a shell into the breach. Your fingers clumsy in wool mittens you scavenged from a supply drop. The turret's a fridge. The cold seeping through your coat and into your bones. Alex, the gunner, is blowing on his hands, trying to keep them nimble for the sight. Ivan's in the driver's seat, cursing as he wraps a scarf around his face, the frost crusting his beard. Yuri's on the radio, his headset half frozen, muttering about delayed orders. Remember that crackling static? The commander's scanning through his periscope, his breath visible in the dim light. You're parked in a snow-dusted forest, the tank half buried under branches for cover. The cold's relentless, creeping through the hatches and chilling the ammo crates. You've got a small oil lamp burning, its flicker barely warming your hands. You joke to Alex, "Nice sauna, huh? Book it for next winter." He grunts, too cold to laugh. You're all fighting the frost, wrapping blankets around your legs and sharing a flask of tea that's gone lukewarm. You think of last night's rations, remember that tushonka? Wishing for something hot to thaw your core. The tank's engine is your only real heat source, but it's off to save fuel, and the cold's claiming every inch. You've smeared grease on exposed skin to block the wind, a trick Ivan swears by. It smells awful, but it works mostly. The tracks are frozen to the ground, and you know you'll need to chip them free before moving. Remember that muddy maintenance. You're dreading it, your hands already numb from loading shells. You chuckle, imagining a modern thermostat. Set to tropical, please. No panzer required. Outside, the snow's falling thick, muffling the world but not your nerves. The commander mutters about German patrols, and you're on edge, knowing a frozen tank's an easy target. You keep the cannon ready, loading an armor-piercing round just in case. The cold makes everything harder. Fingers fumble, metal sticks, and the turret's traverse is sluggish. You've seen frostbite take toes and fingers. Last week, a crewman in another tank lost 3. Remember that fireball's aftermath? You check your boots, stuffed with rags, and hope they hold. The crew's your warmth, in a way. You're all in this, sharing blankets, curses, and the will to keep going. Yuri passes you a cigarette, half frozen but a small comfort. You huddle close, the lamps glow, a faint promise of life. The winter's a beast, as bad as the enemy. But you're fighting it together. You load another shell, your breath clouding, and brace for the next move, praying the tank and your hands don't freeze before dawn. You're perched on the tank's icy hull, the wind cutting through your greatcoat as you scan the dark forest. The engine's faint hum, remember that roaring beast, long faded to save fuel. It's night. Somewhere on the eastern front, the snow falling soft but relentless, blanketing the scars of that village battle. Remember those panzer silhouettes. Your breath fogs in the freezing air, and your hands, wrapped in rags, grip your rifle, the cold metal biting through. You're on watch, nerves frayed, every shadow a potential threat, German scouts, wolves, or just your tired eyes playing tricks. You smirk, thinking how future folks would whine about a late-night shift. Try staying awake with the enemy lurking and frost nipping your toes, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet and Allied memoirs, often took turns on nighttime guard duty, staying vigilant for ambushes or infiltrators, especially in contested areas like the Eastern Front. Your T-34's parked under snow-laden pines, camouflaged with branches. But it's a sitting duck if you miss a threat. A quirky tidbit? Some crews tied tin cans to wires around their tanks as crude alarms, hoping the rattle would wake them low-tech but better than nothing. Historians still argue whether night watches were more about preventing sabotage or just keeping crews on edge. You shift, your boots crunching on the hull, trying to keep blood flowing in your legs. The cold's brutal, worse than the daytime freeze. Remember that frostbitten turret. Your crew's inside, crammed under blankets, snoring or muttering. Alex is out cold. Ivan's cursing in his sleep, and Yuri's probably dreaming of his radio. Remember that crackling static. The commander's next for watch. But for now, it's you against the night. You scan the trees, the snow muffling sound, making every rustle a jolt to your heart. You've seen what happens when a guard dozes tanks sabotaged, crews gone. Remember that fireball? Your rifle's heavy, its barrel frosted, and you keep it close, though you're no marksman. The tank's cannon is your real weapon, but you can't fire it alone. You check the hatches, locked tight, and pat the turret like it's a loyal dog. You're alone, but not your crews just below. Their warmth, a faint comfort. You joke to yourself, great gig, 5-star view of nothing. It's a lie to keep your teeth from chattering. The cold's a beast, and you're fighting it with a thin coat and sheer will. A twig snaps, and you freeze, squinting into the dark. Could be a deer. Could be trouble. You hold your breath, listening. But it's just the wind. Your heart's still pounding, and you curse the night for making you jumpy. You think of home, a warm stove, your mother's soup, anything but this frozen vigil. You've got a cigarette tucked in your pocket, but lighting, it's a risk. A glow could draw fire. You chuckle, imagining a modern security camera. Night vision? Nah, just squint harder. The stars are sharp, peeking through clouds, and you wonder if they're watching you back. The crew's your anchor, even now. Their snore's a reminder you're not alone. You've shared everything, rations, blankets, fear. Remember that, Tushonka? Last night, Ivan told a bad joke about a cow in a tank, and you all laughed too hard, desperate for relief. It's those moments that keep you sane. You check your watch, a battered thing scavenged from a wreck. 2 hours till your shift ends, if the commander wakes up on time. The forest's quiet again, but you don't trust it. You've heard stories of German sappers sneaking in, planting mines. Your job's to spot them, but your eyes are heavy, the cold pulling you towards sleep. You stomp your feet, the crunch loud in the silence, and grip your rifle tighter. The tank's your home, your crew's your family, and you're not letting them down. Dawn's a long way off, but you're holding the line, one frozen breath at a time. You're sprawled in the mud, the tank's tracks looming over you like a steel beast, its engine silent but still warm from the day's grind. Remember that roaring pulse? The air's thick with the stench of oil and wet earth, and your hands are black with grease as you wrestle with a busted track pin. It's dusk, somewhere on the eastern front, and the village you fought through, remember those panzer silhouettes, is a smouldering ruin behind you. Maintenance in this muck is a nightmare, cold, filthy and urgent, with the enemy never far off. You smirk, thinking how future folks would moan about a flat tire. Try fixing a 26-ton tank under shell fire, pal. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet and Allied records, spent hours on maintenance, with T-34 second requiring constant repairs to tracks and engines due to rough terrain and overuse. Your tank's a workhorse, but its tracks snap like brittle bones in this frozen mud, and every delay risks a German counterattack. A quirky tidbit? Some crews used vodka to clean engine parts, swearing it worked better than issued solvent cheers to multitasking. Historians still argue whether poor maintenance or relentless combat wore down tank fleets faster. You're on your knees, hammering a new pin into the track with a mallet, your fingers numb despite your gloves. Ivan's beside you, cursing the mud that's caked his boots to his knees. The commander's keeping watch, his pistol ready, while Alex and Yuri pass tools, their faces grim. You're all exhausted, but stopping isn't an option. Get stuck here, and you're a sitting duck. You think of last week, when a nearby crew didn't fix their track in time. Remember that fireball? The memory's a kick to keep moving. The track's a mess, half buried in sludge, and the pin's fighting you like a stubborn mule. You bang harder, your shoulder aching, and finally it slots in. You grin, joking to Ivan. Fixed it faster than a party meeting. He snorts, tossing you a rag to wipe your hands useless, since it's filthier than you are. The tank's hull is dented, scratched from shrapnel, but still solid. You check the bogey wheels, clogged with mud, and scrape them clean with a crowbar. It's slow, miserable work, but every turn of the track keeps you alive. The cold's creeping in, your breath fogging as the sun dips. You're in a field, no cover, just craters and broken trees. The commander mutters about German scouts, and you feel eyes on you, real or not. You've got a wrench, a hammer, and sheer will to keep this beast running. The engine's next oil's low, and the fuel line's leaking. Ivan's already on it, his hands steady despite the chill. You admire him, even if you'd never say it. You chuckle, imagining a modern mechanic's shop. Oil change? Sure, dodge some mortars first. Your tool's a basic Soviet issue, half worn out. You've got a spanner that's seen better days and a screwdriver you're pretty sure was stolen from a German wreck. You work fast, knowing night's falling, and with it, the risk of ambush. Yuri's checking the radio, cursing its static, while Alex inspects the gun barrel for fouling. You're a team, each man pulling weight in this freezing muck. You think of the crew's bond, remember that shared blanket, how it's stronger than the steel around you. The track's fixed, but you're not done. You climb onto the hull, checking the turret's traverse. It's stiff, probably from the cold. A bit of grease, scavenged from a supply drop, does the trick. You're soaked, shivering, and the mud's like glue, but you're proud. This tank's your lifeline, and you've kept it alive. The commander nods, a rare approval, and you climb back inside, the familiar smell of oil and sweat almost comforting. The engine coughs to life, and you're rolling again, ready for whatever's next, praying it's not another breakdown. You're crouched beside the tank, the icy wind slicing through your greatcoat as you smear mud and snow over the T-34's hull, trying to blend it into the frozen forest around you. The engine's off to avoid detection, remember that roaring beast. And the silence is heavy, broken only by the crunch of snow under your boots. The Eastern Front's a deadly chessboard, and after that village battle, remember those panzer silhouettes. You're hiding from German scouts or worse. Camouflage and stealth are your only shield now, turning your steel beast into a ghost among the trees. You smirk, thinking how future folks would stress over a scratched car. Try painting a tank invisible while the enemy's watching, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet and Allied field manuals, used makeshift camouflage like mud, branches, and nets to conceal tanks, especially in winter when white paint or snow could mask their outlines against the landscape. Your T-34's olive green hull stands out like a sore thumb in this snowy forest, so you're working fast to cover it. A quirky tidbit? Some crews draped white bedsheets over their tanks. Stolen from abandoned villages, for instant winter camo, hope the laundry wasn't missed. Historians still argue whether camouflage tactics or raw firepower saved more tanks in battles like Kursk. You scoop handfuls of snow, packing it onto the turret, your fingers numb despite your ragged gloves. Ivan's helping, tying branches to the hull with rope, his breath fogging as he curses the cold. The commander's scanning the horizon with binoculars, his face tense, while Alex and Yuri pile more snow on the tracks. You're all on edge, knowing a glint of metal could draw a German spotter. You think of last night's watch. Remember those snapping twigs? How every shadow felt like a threat. You mutter to Ivan, "If we're spotted, I'm blaming your shiny boots." He snorts, tossing a snowball at you. The forest's a maze of pines and drifts, perfect for hiding but also for ambushes. You've smeared mud over the tank's sides, blending it with the earth, and draped a net of twigs across the top. It's crude but effective, like everything in this war. You check the turret, making sure no metal gleams. The cannon's barrel is dusted with snow, and you're careful not to clog it, you'll need it ready. Remember that breech slam? You chuckle, imagining a modern camo artist. Bold snow motif, but lacks Wi-Fi. 2 stars. The commander signals to keep it quiet, and you move slow, avoiding sudden noises. You've heard stories of German snipers picking off crews who got careless. Your tank's parked in a dip, half hidden by trees, but you're not invisible. You add more branches, their needles scratching your hands. Yuri's checking the radio, keeping it low to avoid detection. Remember that crackling static? A faint hum of aircraft overhead makes you freeze, but it passes. Your heart's pounding, and you're praying no one spots the tracks you left in the snow. Stealth's a team effort. Alex is brushing away footprints with a branch, while Ivan checks the hull for loose gear that might rattle. You're all in sync, the crew's bond. Remember that shared blanket? Keeping you sharp. You've done this before, hiding from patrols after a breakdown. Remember that muddy track? The cold's your ally, masking heat signatures, but it's also your enemy, stiffening your fingers. You joke to yourself, "Great stealth until we sneeze." The crew's too focused to laugh, but you feel their trust. The tank's nearly invisible now, a shadow in the snow. You climb back inside, the familiar stink of oil and sweat a strange comfort. The commander's got orders to hold here, wait for night to move. You're loading a shell, just in case, your hands moving despite the chill. The forest's silent, but you know it's watching. Your crew's ready, Ivan's steady, Alex is alert, Yuri's on the radio. You're the loader, the camo guy, keeping this beast hidden. For now, you're a ghost, waiting for the dark to slip away. You're slumped in the tank's turret, the steel walls cold against your back, the engine's faint hum, remember that roaring beast. A distant memory as you huddle under a shared blanket with the crew. The forest outside is a frozen maze, your T-34 hidden under snow and branches, remember that camo job. But the war's grind is wearing you thin. It's a rare quiet moment, the Eastern Front holding its breath after days of dodging shells. Remember those panzer silhouettes? Morale's a fragile thread, fraying with every freezing night and empty ration tin, and you're clinging to scraps of hope to keep from breaking. You smirk, thinking how future folks would quit over a bad day at work. Try keeping your spirits up when death's your neighbor, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as noted in Soviet and Allied memoirs, often struggled with low morale due to relentless combat, poor rations, and harsh conditions, with commanders using propaganda and small comforts to boost spirits. Your crew's been at it for months, and the strains showing snapped tempers, tired eyes, and a quiet that's heavier than the snow outside. A quirky tidbit? Some crews carried harmonicas or dice, playing quick games in lulls to trick themselves into feeling human like a mini Vegas in a tank. Historians still argue whether morale or training was the bigger factor in keeping crews fighting through campaigns like Stalingrad. You're chewing a stale biscuit, the last of yesterday's rations, remember that tushonka, passing it to Alex, who takes it like it's gold. Ivan's whittling a stick, his knife flashing in the dim light of your oil lamp. Yuri's humming a tune, some folk song from home, and it's almost soothing, though his voice cracks from exhaustion. The commander's scribbling in a notebook, maybe a letter he'll never send. You're all bone-tired, but these moments shared food, quiet sounds knit you together. You joke. We're one bad song from mutiny, Yuri. He grins, and the crew chuckles, a rare spark of warmth. The tank's a pressure cooker, not just from the cold, remember that frostbitten turret, but from fear and monotony. Last week, Alex snapped at you for a slow load, and you nearly swung at him. Remember that breech slam? You let it go. Cramped quarters breed short fuses. You've seen crews crack, men freezing up or fighting over nothing. You keep it light, telling a story about a cow you saw outrun a truck back home. Ivan snorts, adding his own tale of a drunken uncle. It's nonsense, but it pulls you back from the edge. You pull out a deck of cards, worn and grimy, and deal a quick hand of Durac, a game you all play badly but love. Yuri's cheating, as usual, and you call him out laughing. You'd steal shells from the breach. The game's a lifeline, a reminder there's more than mud and death. You think of home, a flicker of your mother's kitchen, but it hurts too much to linger. The crew's your family now, their faces familiar as your own. You've shared everything: blankets, smokes, fear. Remember that night watch? It's what keeps you going. Outside, the snow's falling, muffling the world, but you know the war's waiting. The commander's talking less, his eyes hollow, and you're all feeling it, the weight of too many battles, too many close calls. You've got a cigarette, one you've been saving, and you light it, passing it around. The smoke curls, and you all breathe easier for a moment. You chuckle, imagining a modern therapist. Combat stress? Try yoga in a tank. No shrinks here, just your crew and these fleeting breaks. The radio's silent for once. Remember that crackling static? But you know orders are coming. You're loading shells, just in case, your hands moving on instinct. The crew's your anchor, Alex's steady aim, Ivan's stubborn driving, Yuri's bad singing. You're the loader, the joker, keeping spirits up. The tank's a cold, hard world, but it's yours. You deal another card, the laughter fading, and brace for the next fight, holding tight to the fragile thread that keeps you all sane. You're lurching through a muddy field, the T-34's tracks grinding as the engine roars. Remember that roaring beast? Your hands slick with sweat as you slam another shell into the breach. The air's thick with diesel fumes and the sharp tang of cordite, the forest you hid in. Remember that camo job? Now a distant blur. It's a chaotic push on the Eastern Front. Your crew locked in a deadly dance of tactics, weaving through smoke and craters to outmaneuver the enemy. The commander's barking orders, Alex's eyes are glued to the gun sight, and every move's a gamble, speed, angle, or death. You smirk, thinking how future folks would stress over a traffic jam. Try dodging panzers in a 26-ton beast, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank tactics, as detailed in Soviet and Allied field manuals, relied on coordinated movements, using terrain and speed to flank enemies, with T-34 excelling in mobile warfare despite their cramped interiors. Your crews trained to hit hard and move fast, but the muddy terrain and German anti-tank guns make every maneuver a risk. A quirky tidbit? Some Soviet crews painted red stars on their tank sides, believing it psyched out the enemy, or at least looked cool before the mud covered it. Historians still argue whether tactical brilliance or sheer numbers drove Soviet tank successes in battles like Kursk. You're loading an armor-piercing round, your arms burning from the pace, as the tank swerves to avoid a crater. Ivan's cursing, wrestling the levers to keep you moving, while the commander shouts, "Left, flank left, 400 meters." You squint through your vision, slit smoke, flashes, and the faint shape of a Panzer IV. Alex fires, the cannon's boom shaking your teeth, and you're already grabbing the next shell. Remember that breech slam? The battlefield's a mess of mud and burning wrecks, and you're weaving through it, praying Ivan's driving keeps you clear of anti-tank traps. The radio's crackling with orders. Remember that static lifeline? Yuri relaying commands to link with infantry ahead. You're part of a bigger push, but it feels like you're alone. Your tank, a lone wolf in a sea of chaos. The commander's using the terrain, a dip here, a tree line there to hide your approach. You joke to yourself, great, we're playing hide and seek with 88mm guns. It's a grim laugh, but it keeps your hands steady. You load another shell, high explosive this time, as Alex tracks a new target, his face tense but focused. Mud's your enemy as much as the Germans. The tracks slip, and Ivan's fighting to keep traction, the tank lurching like a drunk. You've seen tanks bog down and get picked off. Remember that fireball? You brace, your shoulder banging the turret's edge, adding another bruise to your collection. The commander's calling for speed, but the ground's a swamp, slowing you to a crawl. You chuckle, imagining a modern GPS. Recalculating route. Oh wait, you're shelled. No tech here, just Ivan's gut and the commander's map scribbled on scrap paper. The crew's in sync, a machine of flesh and steel. Alex's aim is sharp, Yuri's radio keeps you tethered to command, and Ivan's driving is reckless but right. You're the loader, the pulse keeping the gun alive, and you're moving fast, loading, bracing, loading again. A shell screams past, too close, and you flinch, the tank rocking from the blast. The commander's calm, calling angles, but you feel the strain. You think of last night's card game, remember that fragile morale. How laughter held you together. It's all you've got now. The battlefield narrows to smoke and targets, the tank weaving through chaos. You're flanking, using a ridge for cover, hoping to catch the enemy off guard. Another shot, another load, and you're still rolling, the mud sucking at the tracks. Your crew's your strength, your tactics, your edge, but every second's a roll of the dice. You load another shell, the turret shakes, and you push forward, praying your next move isn't your last. Section 15. ****. You're slumped in the T-34's turret. The steel walls scarred and cold, the engines rumble, remember that roaring beast? Now a faint echo as you catch your breath in a rare lull. The eastern front stretches around you, a battered landscape of mud and snow. The last battle's smoke, remember that tactical dance? Fading into the grey dawn. You're reflecting on surviving another brutal day as a tank crewman, the weight of countless close calls, shells, breakdowns, freezing nights settling like dust on your weary shoulders. Your crew's beside you, faces etched with exhaustion, but alive. And that's enough. You smirk, thinking how future folks would write memoirs about a tough week. Try surviving a war in a steel coffin, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as documented in Soviet and Allied records, endured staggering losses, with some estimates suggesting over 80% of T-34 crews faced death or injury by 1945, yet their resilience turned battles like Kursk. Your survival's a miracle of grit, luck, and the crew you'd die for. A quirky tidbit. Some crews kept talismans like a rabbit's foot or a saint's medallion tucked in the turret, swearing it kept death at bay. Historians still argue whether crew endurance or Soviet production strength was the true backbone of the Red Army's tank victories. You're loading a shell, more out of habit than need, your hands moving despite the ache. The turret's a mess, empty ration tins, spent casings and the faint smell of grease and sweat. Remember that, Tushonka? Alex is cleaning his gun sight, Ivan's checking the fuel gauge, and Yuri's fiddling with the radio. It's static, a familiar hum. Remember that crackling lifeline? The commander's outside, sketching a map, his eyes hollow but sharp. You've survived mud, fire and frost. Remember that frozen turret? Each day, a fight you didn't expect to win. The tank's your world. It's steel, both prison and shield. You've dodged shells. Remember that village battle? Fixed tracks in the muck. Remember that wrench? And, hidden from scouts, remember that camo job? Every scar on the hull tells your story, dents from shrapnel, scratches from branches, paint worn thin by winter's grip. You pat the turret, half superstitious, like it's a friend who's carried you through hell. You joke to Ivan, "This beast's tougher than us." He nods, a rare smile breaking through his grime, streaked face. You think of home, a flicker of warmth, a table with real food, not rations. It's a distant dream, but it fuels you. The crew's your family now, their quirks your lifeline. Alex's steady aim, Yuri's bad singing, Ivan's stubborn driving. You've shared everything: blankets, smokes, fear. Remember that card game? Last night, you all laughed over a story of Yuri's dog outsmarting a fox, a moment that felt almost normal. You chuckle, imagining a modern war movie, needs more explosions, less frostbite, 3 stars. The war's not done with you, the radio's quiet, but orders will come, another push through mud and death. You're not a hero, just a loader who's still breathing, surrounded by a crew that's more than steel. You've endured, and that's your victory. Not medals, but moments like this, alive in the dawn's light. You load another shell just in case, and lean back, the tank's hum a faint lullaby. The war's a beast, but you've outlasted it one more day, and that's enough. The tank's steel grows soft in the dawn's pale glow, its edges blurring as you sink deeper into the blanket. The crew's quiet breaths, a gentle rhythm around you. The world outside fades, the mud, the smoke, the endless fight until it's just you, cradled in this battered machine that's carried you through hell. Your hands, scarred from shells and wrenches, rest heavy, the weight of survival settling like a warm tide. The forest whispers, snow falling soft, muffling the war's harsh song. You're safe, for now, wrapped in the crew's unspoken bond, their warmth a shield stronger than armor. Let the cold slip away, let the engine's hum fade, let your eyelids drift like snowflakes. You've fought, you've endured, and tonight you rest, carried gently into dreams by the quiet pulse of a world still turning. You're sprawled in the mud beside your T-34, the icy slush soaking through your greatcoat as you wrestle with a wrench, the tank's engine silent but still warm from the day's grind. Remember that roaring beast? It's a grey dawn, somewhere on the eastern front, the snow-dusted forest quiet after last night's tense watch. Remember those snapping twigs? The tank's track is busted again, a pin sheared off in yesterday's churned-up field, and your jury-rigging repairs with the enemy potentially just over the ridge. Your hands are numb, grease-streaked, and every bolt fights you like it's got a personal grudge. You smirk, thinking how future folks would call a tow truck for a flat. Try fixing a tank while Germans might be aiming, comrade. Mainstream fact. WW2 tank crews, as documented in Soviet maintenance logs, often performed field repairs under combat conditions, with T-34 second prone to track and engine failures due to overuse and harsh terrain. Your tank's a rugged beast, but it breaks down like clockwork, and you're the one keeping it alive. A quirky tidbit? Some crews used captured German tools, swearing their wrenches were better ironic, considering you're dodging their shells. Historians still argue whether Soviet tank reliability issues stemmed from rushed production or the brutal conditions of the Eastern Front. You're on your knees, hammering a new pin into the track, the cold metal stinging your fingers through torn gloves. Ivan's beside you, cursing as he holds the track steady, his breath fogging in the frost. The commander's keeping watch, his pistol drawn, while Alex and Yuri pass tools, their faces grim. You're all exhausted from the night's vigil, but a broken tank's a death sentence. You think of that village battle. Remember those panzer silhouettes? How a stalled tank nearby didn't make it. You bang the pin harder, muttering, "Stay put, you stubborn mule." The track's a mess, half frozen in mud, and you're scraping ice off with a crowbar. The wrench slips, skinning your knuckles, and you curse loud enough to wake the dead. Ivan laughs, tossing you a rag that's more grease than cloth. You joke, "5-star garage, book your breakdown now." He snorts, but you're both on edge, gunfire's echoing in the distance, too close for comfort. The tank's hull is scarred, shrapnel dents marking near misses. You check the engine next, the oil thick from the cold. Remember that winter chill? A hose is leaking, and you patch it with tape scavenged from a wrecked truck. Your tools are a sad collection Soviet-issue spanners, a hammer that's seen better days, and that German screwdriver you're secretly proud of. You're working fast, knowing a patrol could spot you. The commander mutters about German scouts, his eyes scanning the trees. You've got no cover, just snow and broken pines. Yuri's checking the radio, cursing its static. Remember that crackling lifeline? While Alex inspects the gun barrel, wiping frost off the sight. You're a team, each man fighting the clock and the cold. You chuckle, imagining a modern mechanic's shop. Express service? Sure, dodge some mortars first. The track's fixed, but the engine's coughing when Ivan tests it. You crawl underneath, checking the fuel line, mud caking your face. A loose clamp's the culprit, and you tighten it, praying it holds. You've done this before, under worse conditions, rain, shells, panic. Remember that muddy maintenance? The tank's your lifeline, and you're its doctor, stitching it together with grit and stolen parts. You climb back in, the familiar stink of oil and sweat almost comforting. The engine roars to life, and you exhale, the crew's relief a shared pulse. You're not safe yet. The commander's got orders to move, and you're loading a shell just in case. Remember that breech slam? The tank's rolling again, tracks grinding, but every creak makes you wince, expecting another breakdown. Your crew's your strength, Ivan's steady hands, Alex's sharp eyes, Yuri's stubborn radio. You're the loader, the fixer, the guy keeping this beast alive. The forest looms, hiding threats, but you're moving, and that's enough for now. You brace, ready for the next fight, hoping your repairs hold,